You've heard of high net worth, but we're talking about high net purpose. We want to find out how entrepreneurs, global leaders in our network are allocating financial, human, and intellectual capital in pursuit of purpose. But more importantly, we want to understand the compromises, the paradoxes in their approaches, pitch decks, and philosophies.
Today, we're sitting down with the enigmatic Andrew White, founder of FundApps, to uncover the secret success of what is likely Europe's least known upcoming tech unicorn. What makes the story different is that Andrew bootstrapped and scaled a global financial reg-tech business, today monitoring a reported $27 trillion in assets, which is roughly 17% of the world's total assets under management, having started from a spare room above a London pub. We start with understanding his early journey, how he became an independent thinker, identified an overlooked opportunity, built a tech platform, and then put on a shirt and tie and sold it to some of the largest asset managers in the world. Along the way, he hired great people and built the principles and values that have made FundApps the global business it is today. The story is of a founder that has been uncompromising in building a product, team, and client base, while also creating the UK's first B Corp SaaS company that is purposeful and intentional in everything that it does. This is the Andrew White episode. Andrew White, it's a pleasure to have you on the High Net Purpose podcast.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
When we got lost in the desert shortly after we first met, it was clear that you're a pretty uncompromising, action-focused, authentic person. So the idea of having a lofty conversation on purpose wouldn't be easy.
I'm not an easy man, so I'm looking forward to what you're going to throw at me.
So, but when it comes to articulating a purpose, it's not like you have some overarching description of it in your life.
I find it hard to distill down all this neurons and synapses that fire so many times a day into one single purpose or vision or mission. But obviously, as somebody who's got this far in life and not done too terribly, I think there's obviously some overarching themes I care about and look to achieve in life.
And I don't think that's unusual. And if I was being honest myself, I do think it's kind of a multifaceted thing, isn't it? It's and maybe part of the reason why I started doing this was to talk to people who are, some of them able to articulate it really clearly, and others, as you say, like yourself, it's sort of trying to find out what that path through is. Is there something, because like myself, you're Irish, is there something that maybe in our past we would have seen, in Ireland, sort of sanctimonious kind of, purpose signaling stuff that makes it uncomfortable for us to describe what we're doing?
I think there is, to be honest. I grew up in an Ireland where getting a job was the life driver number one. So even back to when I went into high school and secondary school, I had to choose between French and German. And I remember even at the ripe old age of 12, making a conscious decision to study German because Germany had a better economy back in the 70s and 80s. And I thought, speaking German would enable me to get a job in Germany. And as I'm sure you remember back then, doing a summer in Mercedes or Audi was kind of the dream job. And hopefully getting a factory job was an aspirational thing. So yeah, I grew up in an Ireland, as you remember, of high unemployment, low growth, low chances. So for me, to this day, when you suddenly are dealing in an absolutely different kind of area, it's very difficult to fathom, from a kid that just wanted to make sure they got a job to where we are now.
So what else from your youth, when you look back to it, you think could have molded who you are today?
I had the classical, well, not classical for Ireland at all, but single parent, only child, working mother. So, it was definitely... when I see that the kind of standards nowadays where kids are looked after and driven to school and etc., I was definitely, sounds like a Monty Python sketch, but walked to school 2 miles with my own lunch and let myself in when I got home. But, again, these were fantastic times for me. I had a great youth, but it was certainly not what a lot of people would expect nowadays, a lot of children experience nowadays. So there was a lot of self-reliance and lighting fires and putting ovens on and, I remember carrying coal up as well because it was a coal fire back in the day as well. God, this does sound like a Monty Python sketch, but yeah.
But what, you became quite independent?
Yeah,
young?
Independent definitely was, and obviously the only child thing as well meant it was definitely self-resilience or self-reliance.
But it didn't make that independence and having that sort of a upbringing didn't make you full of fear. You sort of seemed that you were very open to other stuff and to travel.
Quite the opposite. That's definitely, there you go. And into suddenly my drivers was definitely independence, and I got that from my mother. She was fiercely independent. Never remarried, brought me up on her own, held down a few jobs, definitely, and a very warm person who would always, say, I remember as a child, she'd say hello to the garbage men, and I was like, as a precocious child, oh, you can't say hello to them, but she'd say like, they're doing a job. And I'd be like, oops. But yeah, she was very right. So yeah, fiercely independent as a kid and not reliant on others to do what I wanted to do.
And even the path into becoming a technologist, it could have veered off radically different depending on how you apply to university.
Yeah, there's I still don't believe it to this day, but in Ireland, I'm sure you remember that there's before you finish your final exams in secondary school, you write off to the central agency saying what you want to study in university, and on top of my list was computer science. And then around March time, shortly before the exams, I had a change of heart, change of mind. I thought, okay, I like computers, but I don't love them. It's not my driving force. I'm more into, animals and would love to work in Africa and help out there. So I sent a change of mind form, an official form, got it registered, went down to the Blackrock post office, got the stamp on it, paid £2 probably back in the day, changing my top choice from computer science to zoology. And when the exam results came out in September, I looked at the paper and it said I'd got computer science. So
Wow.
By chance or by design, some postman dropped a letter somewhere, or it got ripped up, or a divine hand plucked it out of the postman's bag. But the letter that I'd registered never arrived in the agency. And as it was, I studied computer science rather than zoology.
And had you been into computers as a kid?
I had, yeah, a classic geek, and only child would sit and type in code into computers and try it out and change it around, and yeah, found a lot of fun in computers as a kid.
Because you then did at one point trying to apply to get a role in Africa.
Yeah, it was when after finishing uni, I was thought, okay, like straight into the workforce doesn't sound right for me, so I applied to an Irish charity that was looking for volunteers abroad, but whether it was lack of experience or I think there was a small payment I had to make as well, they were like, no thanks. And that was my first kind of inkling that charities also have standards that they need to have good people, and some kid from Dublin wasn't going to just fly over to Africa and help them out.
Wow. What age was that when you applied for that?
I think it was 21 or something like that, yeah.
So you don't seem to be the sort of gap year student type, but you have spent a couple of years traveling the planet. Can you tell when was that, and what drove you to just take off with a backpack? Or
yeah, it was a backpack, a small one. I think going back again to the independence and probably overconfident, shall we say, when I think it was 2003, I was living in Frankfurt at the time, working for a software company, and literally just got bored. I was for 5 years in the role, 5 years in Frankfurt, just broken up, classic. So I decided, okay, I could get another job, but that sounds really boring. So how about just travel the world for a year? So I set off without any kind of, job to return to or even city to return to, because I knew I wouldn't move back to Germany. So I traveled around through Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and then Southern South America, and then arrived back in Dublin pretty much exactly a year later.
And when you planned out that route, what were you looking to do? Were you looking to go to places where you could go party or look at ancient ruins, or what was it?
Ancient ruins. I looked in a mirror. I think. Yeah, a bit of everything. I think I called myself a career racehorse. I'd, gone from uni, first job, second job. The salaries had increased every year. By 30, I was managing 20 people and was running a P&L. And, suddenly it was like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to actually experience not quite gap year, as you said, but to see some other things. I'd only traveled the classical maybe a week here and a week there before. So it was like, okay, take some serious time out and see what happens. And maybe that is kind of the arc of my life, that there wasn't any master plan. It was just, I knew this would be good for me. I knew there was something out there that I wanted to see. And as it turned out, I climbed 6,000 meter mountains. I became a rescue diver. I, went to various temples and forests and did lots of things, parachuted, bungee jumped, you name it, and basically just went where my kind of where the wind took me. That was a really nice thing to do for the first time. Like literally no timelines. My flights were changeable. It was just like, maybe I'll stay here another week. Maybe I'll stay here another day. I don't like it here, I'm moving tomorrow. So that kind of flexibility, which I think we're missing in this day and age, where your life is nearly prescripted down to the hour. So yeah, just having that kind of free will and choice where to go on my own was fantastic.
So it was more spontaneous, and
spontaneous.
Maybe a Lonely Planet was the only thing you could find rather than a website.
Yeah, it was definitely, 2003, the internet was around, but it definitely wasn't populated with the amount of things nowadays. So it was the Lonely Planet indeed.
Did the travel change you, impact you? Did it, the conditioning that you'd had from a kid or anything?
Yeah, massively. I think that really was the eye opener that I needed. Okay, as I said, came from humble backgrounds in Ireland, but since then had earned well and was hobnobbing with private equity and financial types. So I still remember to this day. We were in Cambodia, and it was an overnight bus ride, and I think about 6 a.m. The bus broke down, as they do. And, I was a bit kind of, I need to get there for 9 and hopefully get into a hotel. But, and a little bit freaked out. How long is this going to take? And then I remember the sun was rising, sat down on the side of the road. There was a kind of little tiny village there, and a lady asked me would I like some coffee, and I sat there and just kind of realized that it didn't matter, that the bus was going to get there eventually. And there was kids playing, and they were, from Western purposes, poor. They had clothes, but they weren't going to school, or they weren't doing, or probably they were going to school, but that was earlier to that. But I saw happiness, properly people being, for what I consider poor, but being very happy. And it was a more social life as well. I was used to the kind of European, you live in a flat on your own, and you meet your friends, but suddenly you could see grandparents and parents and children, and kind of that kind of social effect that I think we're missing in Europe. So anyway, long story short, I do remember thinking, okay, what I'd considered happiness was, the career paths, 6-figure salaries, and the Ferrari, et cetera. Then suddenly you're seeing people that look generally happy, and I didn't hear a kid cry for about a month, whereas Europe, you do all the time. So it was definitely a huge experience to see what my vision of success or happiness looked like suddenly fade away.
So what was the catalyst for setting up the business? Well,
I actually came back from that trip and knocked about for a while, and then realized that I'd worked with a lot of clever people, but I sensed a lot of time wasting and not making decisions, and a little bit of fear and conservatism, whereas that's not my character as we started off with. So decided, hey, I can do this, classical overconfidence. I can do this a lot better. So set up FundApps in 2010 with the idea that I could do compliance for large financial institutions much better than they were doing previously.
But doing compliance for large financial institutions, they don't want to buy from smaller organizations, particularly for something as important as their compliance.
Yeah, I found that out the hard way, and that was maybe a bit of the business plan that was lacking, that a one-man show knocking on the door of even a smaller hedge fund wasn't going to work too well. But I think that the real kicker was we did it 10x better. I think Andreessen talks about that it has to be 10x, and my theory was that all these compliance officers around the world traditionally were doing it themselves. They were writing Excel macros and code and whatever, whereas it's the classic thing. If you want a glass of milk, you don't buy a cow. And the compliance officers want to be compliant, not do all the work themselves. And my idea was, okay, we take the technology, put it on the cloud, and hey, we'll code the rules for you as well. So we'll provide a service where you just send us the data we need, and we'll tell you if you're doing things right or not. And that was a kind of leap of faith. And as fate would have it, we grew a little bit. We had about 2 or 3 people maybe at the time, and the first hedge fund came along that said, that's exactly what we need.
But you got an initial product quite quickly that you could sell into the market, and you knew what market you were going for.
Yeah, this is a good one. I had one regulatory product that it was UCITS for the European mutual fund regulation, and I went around, knocked on a few doors, put on the suit. I was living with my cousin in his pub at the time, and people were like, "Okay, this is a done problem. There's not a real difficulty in doing it anymore." But then one hedge fund said there's a new European regime around short selling, and it's quite onerous and tricky, and you have to make reports. And in classic startup hustle style, I was like, I can do that. So I literally went back to the office or to my cousin's pub and coded kind of a prototype to do that. Went back about a week later. They're like, yeah, that's exactly what I need, and started to iterate on that. And
wow.
A chance would have it, it was a fairly quickly evolving piece of regulation that became pan-European. It started with a few countries.
And you needed just one piece of regulation, or it ended up becoming books of regulation into lots of products? It
started off with one regulation and was that way for maybe 5 or 6 years, and then as the nice things happen in life, we had a very good client success team that made sure our clients were looked after, and that the product team was iterating quickly, so the product was always developing and adding functionality. So when we kind of said, okay, well, let's not be a one-trick pony, as the name FundApps implies. There's multiple products. We launched product 2, and obviously it was an adjacent regulation that people are like, yeah, we also have that problem and it's not solved very well, or this looks better. They took that on, and since then we've launched about 10 other products. So it's become a multi-product story.
And you didn't go out and raise loads of capital in order to do this?
No, we completely bootstrapped it from day one, which in hindsight, I only realized is quite tricky to do. But at the time, it was just the most normal thing in the world. Yeah, I didn't want to work for a company for another company, or have a boss for a reason. And suddenly having private equity or VC in the background, trying to steer what I was doing wasn't appealing. And as chance would have it, B2B fintech is nice. It's a non-trivial amount of money that each client is charged, and generally they're very sticky. It's just not someone like B2C where people churn all the time. So basically our revenue grew like that, and our costs grew very slowly. So it was from basically year one onwards just nicely profitable, and there was no need to. So yeah, we completely bootstrapped it.
And that was from when? So just timeframes. When did you make that first pitch?
So company launched in September 2010. I think first client signed in January 2011. They went bankrupt very soon after. That was a roller coaster. Credit card was maxed out. Couldn't pay my co-founder. And then it was summer 2012 where the first bigger client signed up. So it was nearly 2 years start to finish, from starting to code to actually having some money in the bank.
So while there was lots of growth in the asset management industry during that time, we were in the sort of dark clouds of post-global financial crisis. Yeah. But you built the business without needing to get lots of external capital into it, and you bootstrapped it along. If you'd had access to that capital back then, do you think you could have built something faster and bigger?
It's a good question, one I actually don't think about that often. I think something I personally believe in, and I think applies to companies as well. Reputation is everything. If you become known for doing lots of things in a mediocre fashion, that's not a very good long-term story. So for me, it was, do one thing well, get feedback, learn, iterate, make sure it's getting better every day, rather than, imagine hiring 50 people that didn't have a clue what we were doing, salespeople that didn't know how to sell it. Yeah. And you'd manage to grow somehow, but would it be sustainable? You'd probably make bad technical decisions. As I said, I'm a techie by background, bad technical decisions that at some point you need to reverse and rewrite. And, I think this is very much my view of the world, that building for the long term is the right thing, and making shortcuts or trying to, optimize for a 3 or 4 year investment cycle is going to lead to very stupid decisions, even down to sales. If you've got somebody overlooking your shoulder and wanting to make sure you hit your X% growth per year, then of course, end of year, you're probably going to discount or throw something in for free just to win deals. Whereas we were always like, well, end of year, next year's another year. We don't mind if you sign next year. We're not going to incentivize you to sign this year. So I think more classically, just more long-term thinking and more long-term planning meant that we weren't, optimizing for the next quarter or next year.
So I can imagine conversations back then with all that regulation that came out after the financial crisis and the move for more transparency for fund managers around the world, etc. There would have been, well, we need to go quick because the competition are going to get there before us.
Yeah, it was a fun one, and I do say to whoever asked me, like, no kid leaves college and wants to start a reg-tech. It's not, it's not a la Facebook or even the Wise of this world where you're doing consumer finance, which is relatively easy to understand. Reg-tech comes generally from many years of seeing it done and understanding the intricacies. So I wasn't particularly worried from somebody coming out of the woodwork and like doing it, because as I said, it's absolutely not trivial to get right. And the existing competitors, I think that is the problem, that they only go after things where they know they're going to make a lot of money, or it's a clear you win, that they've made the analysis, the revenue is going to be this, cost of this. Like, I think it was didn't hit anybody's radar until roughly a few years ago that this was a really great market to go after. So no, I was keeping an eye on what was going on, but I think I subscribed to Bezos's view that don't sweat the competition, focus on what you do and do it well.
So you quietly, I use the word quietly because you're sort of one of the great unknown technology stories.
Quietly, people are like, "Whoa, where did you just overnight success story in 15 years?" But we didn't go for press. We didn't go for press releases or try and get tech grunt coverage. No, it was definitely not kept quiet, but we just didn't blow our own trumpet.
What did you learn about selling?
It's bloody difficult. This is for anybody getting into wanting to do their own startup, and selling to banks sounds fantastic because banks have lots of money in theory, and they do. But with that comes a world of pain. For most companies or many companies, your sales cycle, especially when you're new, might be 2 years long. And, certainly without VC funding or, parents' pockets hanging around for 2 years to make your first sale is going to be tricky. So I think, again, going back to the long-term thing, that kind of, if you are building something good and it's getting better every day and you're ensuring that you're looking after your clients, then at some point, a bit like boiling frog, you rise above and somebody's like, actually, this is what we need now. You just have to stick with it long enough. But it is tricky. Like these institutions are famous for, even though they might say it, the not changing too quickly, having legacy technology. The amount of COBOL still in these companies is huge. So, having that faith that you will be able to get there eventually. So I think some element of, long-term belief that we will get this client. And we had a lovely story last year. A very large US pension fund emailed. We had dealings with them, I think, in 2015. And we were way too small back then. We were 20 people. But they emailed my salesperson back then, and she replied, and they dealt with each other for a few weeks. And then they were like, okay, no, you're too small. Then in 2023, so 9 years later, they emailed the same salesperson, again, talking about long-term. She's still with us. She's now head of sales for EMEA. They emailed the same person as a reply to her email from 2014 saying, hey, we'd like to talk again.
Wow.
And she forwarded on the email to our US salesperson who picked it up, and then we sold within about 6 months. So that kind of patience, if you're doing the right thing, people will eventually find you. So,
And the sale was always, what were the parts of the sale for you when you went in to meet these fund management firms? Were you trying to build a relationship? Were you doing a technical sale? Were you aggressive, or were you just taking your time and that they would see the light and how great your product was?
Probably the latter, because, the techie that believes code can solve everything. But it was generally, hey, listen, I'd like to show you what I'm working on. And that was, again, there's a few gray hairs here. I'd done this before. I was kind of known in the industry a little bit. So either people knew of me or my old products. But certainly getting there, just like to show you what I've got, what I'm working on. I think this is the new way of doing compliance. You don't want to be coding rules yourself. You don't want to be trying to stay up to date with the SEC and ESMA and all that. That's, shouldn't be necessary part of your job. How about we do all of it for you? Which again is a bit of a leap of faith. And with 5 people, 6 people, that was tricky. But again, it was this is what we're working on. We've already got 1 client, 2 client. And every time the story got slightly better, we're 20 people and 50 20 clients, etc. But it was always a chat. And then even early days, I hired my first salesperson in 2014. And he, I think, had his first sale within a few weeks as well. So it was right time, right place. Always a bit of serendipity in any good story.
But the hierarchy of why they were buying what you had. So in the regulatory space, quite often we get sold fear, right? That, if you don't do this, the world is going to fall in on you type of thing.
Yeah.
What was it you were leading with?
I think that was part of it. It was multiple things, as I said, that you don't want to be doing all this work yourself. Yeah. Let us do it for you. So we call it a good night's sleep, that you don't want us to be stressing out or going on date night thinking you forgot to check the SEC website for changes. So good night's sleep. The other one was fear, well, not peddling fear, but making it clear to people. The threshold of ownership are going down. There used to be classically, you need to have 10% ownership of a company to need to make a disclosure. It's gone down to 5%, 3%, and even 1% in some countries. That as soon as you own 1%, you have to tell the regulator. So, educating them on this is going to get more difficult. The timelines are getting tighter as well. It used to be kind of a month-end thing. Then it was T plus 10, T plus 4, and now even in Europe, some disclosures are same day. So it's just kind of this, this is a lot of pain that you don't really want to have. And then there's a third element, I guess, for you as well, that personal liability is becoming a thing in the industry, which is probably no bad thing, to be honest. A lot of people made bad decisions because they knew the company was going to have to bail them out. Now, I think it was last week that the CCO of Credit Suisse was personally fined for some tuna scandal. So I think it's clear now that as a compliance officer, you've got a lot of things to be worrying about, and trying to do them all yourself isn't probably the best strategy.
One reference that we had on you is that you tend not to compromise too easily. Was that an important part of both the product build, probably who you hired as well, and how you sold? Is that fair?
Was that reference my wife? No, I think that probably is one of the most, if you're to distill down a person into a few characteristics, very true. Sounds bad normally compromising, but not compromising. But I think in a startup sense, it is probably what I would, other than focus, staying pure, focus, compromise, no compromise, staying pure to your vision, the kind of same thing there. That we were early on. I remember a lovely story that we had a large Canadian bank, and they wanted an add-on. And it was just didn't fit in with our vision of what the product wanted to do. And the CSM had to go back and say, we're not going to do it. And he came back about 2 weeks later, very happy with himself, saying, they're willing to pay. And I was like, the decision still remains no. I don't care if they want to pay or not. This is about purity of vision of the product. And paying doesn't change that. And, this young kid's mind was blown that a CEO of a bootstrap startup was turning down money from a bank. And I think that goes back to it all, as you said, with hiring as well. Like we were, if we don't find the right person this quarter, we'll find them next quarter. Whereas certainly if you're a VC backed, you'd be hiring the best person you could find roughly within a 4-week period of time. We were like, we didn't find somebody, we didn't hire. So product purity, who joined the company, things like becoming a B Corp, that was very clear. Like this is what needs to be done, and wavering from that is a bad idea. So I totally agree.
Can we go back to that though? What was the problem? That you're going to get paid for putting this on for the client, and you decided, no, we're not going to do it because
it just didn't. It wasn't something we wanted. We wanted for the product to do. It was like, I want all the buttons green.
Yeah,
and like sure, but no, it's not going to. It's not going to improve. Basically, it's not going to improve the product. We have a vision, and we like to say we're opinionated, and opinionated normally is a bad thing. But I think in SaaS, having an idea of how your product should be used and how it's applied best and how it functions best is a very compelling argument versus here's a spreadsheet, do it with it as you will. Yeah. I think this idea that clever companies should know how their product works best. So we were this request they had just didn't add value to the product. Didn't add, no other client wanted it. We mentioned it to a few people, are like, that makes no sense to us. So just being clear about that, and then obviously starting to do that at scale. We've got 160 clients now. That becomes, and I don't make that decision anymore, but like the people that have joined since know my view that unless it adds value to a considerable percentage of our client base, there's no point doing it because you deviate off or you start building stuff you don't need to build. We were also asked early on, did we want to build a bespoke module that did X, Y, Z. And we're like, yeah, sounds interesting, but that bespoke module kind of only applies to maybe 5 places or 5 institutions around the world. So it's not really a scalable business that we want to get into. So we said no. So it's very tricky making the. And I think the entrepreneurs saying no. It's we're meant to say yes all the time. I think saying no is a very powerful thing.
What have you learned about hiring the right people?
It's bloody difficult. So we've. We grew slowly at the beginning, and that was easy. I interviewed everybody, and then at some point it was stepping back and letting the people that I'd hire as well. And I think there's some of the classic things that are true, like hiring for experience. It sounds logical, and some, especially in financial services, where somebody's worked for a bank before or worked in this area of regulation. But you know what? There's nothing that beats hunger and curiosity and drive that will win out a million times over somebody who has the knowledge, who doesn't have the drive, who can't be arsed really, who's just looking for a 9 to 6. And it's very tempting for a young startup to hire somebody from the banks or asset managers who's done this job before, and then they come in, they don't work out. We've done it thankfully a few times. Those that we have worked out. But I think that the mindset of somebody who goes to work for a bank or financial institution is different to those who work for our startup, where, as you know, there's a lot of ambiguity. This has never been done before. There are no clear answers. So I think somebody who can deal with that, and that's a kind of mindset that you can't just get in the shops. It's somebody who really deals well with ambiguity, who doesn't have a problem making decisions, whereas in a lot of these financial institutions, decision making is nearly beaten out of you. You're told not to make decisions. So I think trying to find that right mindset, and I said the hunger and drive and ambition and curiosity, that's what we really look for.
But you're also having a tech team in London, and then also the regulatory space goes through these big fads and cycles where people will aggressively hire certain areas because people have that experience, etc. Have you managed to retain staff the way that you have? It's an unusually high level.
Yeah, I think our current tenure is over 3.5 years, which is pretty much unheard of for kind of a smallish tech company. I'm obviously going to say it. I think we treat our team right. I think we're a good employer. We have very flexible policies. We introduced a 6-month gender-blind parental leave early on, back when we were maybe only 30 or 40 people. But I think this idea, especially nowadays with AI, having a small group of very good, very driven, very clever people is a winning solution. And obviously having hundreds and thousands of employees is going to be tricky. But I think that kind of a small team that get the vision. I sit in the office and the ranks with everybody. No glass offices for me. So I think being part of it, and I won't say inspiring, but giving people that idea of where this can go and on the market opportunity and how we can do what we do and continue doing it and be the best is inspiring to a lot of people. So I think.
Because it's I guess bringing around that purpose side to it again, there does, when you look around the business, seem to be something that's suggesting that there's more of a mission going on at the firm. And you do talk about work with purpose as being a value. What is that? Where does it come from? Is it that because you're in compliance, regulatory stuff, you're supposed to talk about integrity and ethics, or is there a angle somewhere else in what you're doing around this?
Yeah, I think, going back to it, we were the very first UK SaaS company to become a B Corp in 2018. I remember my then hiring a head of people in 2017 and saying just after the interview, by the way, welcome, you got the job, but your main goal for next year is helping us become a B Corp. He went, no problem at the time. I only found out since that he didn't have a clue what a B Corp was, but good old fake it till you make it. He worked it out and did a very good job of helping us. But yeah, we became a B Corp in 2018. And kind of it definitely pervades the company. And, you can see it's seeping into how we do business. And I think making the right decisions, again, going back to longevity and going back to Bootstrapped, not making short-term decisions, making long-term decisions, not trying to make a quick buck, make a client a long-term ally, etc. And I think that resonates with people. It's a crazy world we live in, and trying to find something where you you're not just, doing your 9 to 5 for the paycheck, but you also realize that because of you working for this company, we give back a significant amount of our profits to charity. We have unlimited volunteering leave. We try and do the right thing. I think we build water wells for people's 10th anniversary at the company. So there's a lot of things where people realize, it's bigger than this, it's bigger than a paycheck, and people, that resonates with people.
How can you have unlimited voluntary leave? Do you get paid for that?
Yeah, it's paid. People are sensible with it. Nobody goes off and volunteers for 3 months, but some people do multiple days per year, and we try and incentivize it. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I was about work with purpose. What does that actually mean within the business?
I think there was the CEO of Slack that said something like, do your work until 5 p.m. then feck off home. And I like that idea of a lot of larger institutions, where there's a little bit of presenteeism, there's a little bit of go into the spreadsheet and copy and paste all day long. That, it's just about making up the hours, where for me it's, get into the office, do your thing, do your task for the day. Some days that might mean you're finished at 4. Some days that might means you finish at 7, but not just sticking around because you're meant to be there. So I think that kind of idea of you've got tasks for the day or the week, get them done. Day, week, month, year. There's always a list of tasks, but trying to just work on that and not just spend time, in meetings, discussing things ad nauseum. Go into the meeting, have a short meeting. I tell people not to have meetings. I'm an absolute anti-meeting person. I hate them. But if you do have a meeting, make it purposeful. Get out of there quickly. Make a decision. Move fast forward.
It's more intentional.
It's intentional.
Going on.
Yeah. Make a decision. Don't dither. There's a lovely. I think it was a CEO of GE said something like. Oftentimes you stumble across the best ideas, but to stumble you need to be moving. And I think that's a classic thing. You get some smart people in a room and they tend to debate and pros and cons, but you know what? Make a decision, go down that path. If you realize it's the wrong path, go back the other path. But you need to make a move. You need to move forward to stumble across new things. So,
and you talk about have courage.
Yeah, I think, starting a startup to sell into the world's largest financial institution took a modicum of courage. Becoming a B Corp when we were small and not much money took courage. I think if we're looking around the corporate world at the moment, there's a lot of leaders without courage. They're doing what is most useful to them, what is most useful to their business, what's optimizing shareholder value. But it might be completely turning their backs on what's the right thing to do and what's the moral thing to do, shall we say. So I think having courage would mean making those right decisions and not just the easy decisions.
So the decision to start going global and moving out of just selling to, I guess, asset managers around London, did that come because you were pulled by your customers, or did you start going, no, we're gonna start hitting the US and Asia and elsewhere?
I would love to say yes, that was the intentional plan, but no, it happened that we had a website, we had an email address, and that the first American institutions heard of what we were doing, and they emailed in, and we were like, okay, we'll do a demo East Coast time. And one of our first clients was a large Connecticut-based hedge fund, and they were delighted to find us. So it happened more organically than that. And obviously then there was a little bit more of, okay, we need an office in North America. So we set up our office in New York in 2016 and then set up our office in Singapore in 2019. So there was a little bit of get a client there first and then open the offices.
And because you said hedge funds a couple of times, were your first adopters those types of managers, and then you started adding more of the long only community afterwards?
Yeah, I think the first handful of clients were probably small to medium sized hedge funds, because lack of bureaucracy, they didn't have a 600-page RFP to fill out. Somebody could sign off relatively quickly, so the sales cycle was diminished, and it was like, they were like, that's great, thanks very much, we'll take it. So definitely.
And you weren't competing against internal teams that maybe had already been in there?
There wasn't the classic thing of there's 50 people in IT that have got not enough work to do, they'll build it themselves. They were like, we're here to make money, we're here to generate alpha, why would we bother coding a compliance system? So the very first clients were hedge funds, and then, as you said, moved into medium, larger asset managers, and now we have some of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds as well as the clients.
So one of the stats you shared was that what percentage of assets under management globally are
It's a hard number to pin down, but we monitor $27 trillion every single day, which depending on is probably somewhere around 15-16% of the global assets under management.
Wow.
My mother's very proud.
Bit of Austin Powers moment, is it 27? How fast has the growth been? I don't know I know you're a private company and stuff, so but what sort of growth was there? A few periods where it sort of stepped up, or what happened?
Yeah, I think I can't even remember the first few years. We were just happy to get 1 or 2 clients per year, but I think in 2018 we doubled in size, and since then we've been well north of 20% year on year. Last year was 31% growth. So despite being a 15-year-old teenager, our growth is still in kind of early stage startups sizes.
And it is characterized as mission critical software, is it? Like these corporations can't.
Yeah, we come under a lot of scrutiny because it's considered not outsourcing per se, but we're taking a lump of the responsibility or the duty from the asset manager. So it is for a lot of people mission critical, and part of their daily workflow. We have some users that would be in our software 8 hours a day, so it's their that's their bread and butter.
Because how do you manage to sort of be courageous and go and do things along with this is really, we can't make mistakes here. The financial offset to this, if we get it wrong, is huge. How do you maintain those sort of two cultures at the same time?
That's a really good question. I never thought about that. Yeah, it is obviously tricky, and I think the taking calculated risks and knowing where issues could arise. But I think from a technical point of view, my co-founder realizing that this was a fairly critical area, put tests around the entire system so that every single function and every single module has hundreds of thousands of tests around it, that we're confident that it's doing the job. And obviously the developers that join us get that from day one, that we can't have 1 + 1 adding up to 3. So there's a very clear, we need to do this right. And I think that comes back to mission as well. We're not a social network for cats. We're people know that this is mission critical software and they take that seriously. And if you don't care about quality or you just fire out some code, you're probably not going to last with us. So it's a very clear statement to the developers when they're working on it.
So just trying to understand that again. So because you're taking that fear and that worry away from the clients. You're bringing it into your firm, but you think the processes, the technology, what you have is able to organize that in a way that it becomes something that the firm isn't sort of stressed by continuously, that they can go and build a growing company, release new stuff. And that's the tech, it's the process, it's the people.
Yeah, I think that the kind of how we pitch it nowadays, as I said, we have 27 trillion, 15% of the global assets under management, 160 something clients. If you're going to be client 161, and every client uses the same set of rules, there's no deviations, it's the same rules. So for client 161 joining us, you're going to be using the same set of rules that all these institutions who've done their due diligence, some of us have been using us for 10 years. And obviously, if we were doing a bad job, they would have left us. So I think our prospects take an awful lot of comfort from, we are the market leader, we know what we're doing, we have the most expertise. And again, it's strength in numbers. It's one of our favorite sayings. Do you want to be doing the same as the 15% of the global assets management? Or do you want to get your intern hungover on a Friday morning coding this for you in Excel? I think probably I know the answer.
But those decisions made a long, long time ago in terms of not being pulled off to do various different things and ending up with a sprawling architecture means that you can do what you do now at this level and rate.
Yeah, and I think going back to the company values and courage, we rewrote the entire engine system starting in 2020. It took 4 years, probably at least £5 million of investment. We rewrote it from the ground up because we knew we wanted to have a clean platform to build the next level of growth for the company. And again, that's a level of courage that most companies would be like, in Irish, it'll be grand, just leave it. We'll tweak it as we go along, but we realized that, it wouldn't scale to the world's largest asset managers. So we absolutely rewrote it from the ground up. So again, those long-term decisions come back and I think they benefit us.
Because how many employees today?
135.
How have you managed to let go as the business has grown? And as you said, you've hired people who've hired people.
That's definitely one of the trickier things as an entrepreneur. That, I remember Bill Gates talking about how he used to look out into the car park in Redmond and seeing who was still there or not, and learning that wasn't the right thing to do. So I think for me, I've a high trust by nature. I think that goes back to the travel. I still remember it being in Ho Chi Minh City on Christmas Eve, 2003, trying to get my visa to Cambodia. And they needed my passport, and we went back on Christmas Day, and they weren't open. And then Boxing Day, they were not open again, or they didn't have my passport. And I was with a Canadian guy. I was absolutely freaking out, and I was like, "Well, probably our passport will be here tomorrow." And him just kind of going, "How can you be so chill about this all?" And a little bit of just trust in the world, and things generally work out. So I think, trust but verify is probably the best saying. Was it Ronald Reagan who ever said that? But trust people, or, don't want to do a bad job. Trust people aren't going to try and break things. Obviously, occasionally verify that's true.
Yeah.
But by and large, I think that's the only way to do it successfully. I see too many entrepreneurs and people of larger companies, like the CEO is still interviewing the secretaries and the cleaners nearly. It's like, that is not a good use of your time.
Yeah.
People are boasting about it on LinkedIn. I still interview everybody, and we're 500 people. I'm like, well, I think you should be building a business and focusing on the strategy and trusting your team to hire rather than verifying everyone yourself. So
where do you spend most of your time these days?
In the pub.
In the pub?
No, I do not. I think that's the most tricky thing, is certainly our size of company, that every day is different. Sometimes there's a HR issue, sometimes there's a client thing going on, sometimes there might be a pitch, sometimes there might be finances that need some discussing. But by and large, it's just being available for people. I try and keep my diary empty, so if anybody wants to have a quick chat or pick my brains about the company, I'm there for them.
Is that something you do intentionally?
I do
intentionally. Create
I don't have a busy diary. I don't know if you've seen the Bill Gates and Warren Buffett on CNN show, where Bill points to Warren's diary or his pocketbook, and he's only got 2 appointments in there for the day, and he's like, these are the 2 richest men in the world, and he says time is the most valuable thing I have. And for me, being in every meeting and every strategy discussion and every product roadmap isn't a good use of my time. So being available there for somebody who needs a quick question asked or a quick how should we do this, I think that's a far better use of my time.
Wow. Okay. So you mentioned that the firm does quite a lot for the team. You also donate a lump of your profits. What are the things that you care deeply about outside of? There was an Economist article which said that you'd done philanthropy into education and poverty relief in poor countries.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, like Michael Jackson said, I believe children are the future. But I do think that, while solving some problems in retrospect, and earthquake relief and all these are very valuable, I think being able to educate and get kids healthy, especially in the developing world, is probably the best bang for buck you can get. Certainly, I think things like clean water, for example, I think there's so many things that stem, certainly in Africa, from not having clean water. I mean, gender equality, because females are generally the one that go get the water. Education, because if you're going 4 hours to get clean water, you can't educate yourself, etc. So even putting a well in a village, where it means that girls can go to school and people aren't sick because of dirty water, is a massive, and it's not that expensive. So I think education and trying to prevent simple diseases in the developing world. And in the UK, for example, I'm a big believer or big supporter of Hackney Pirates, now called Literacy Pirates. Again, really cool kids in East London that start off and, come generally from families who English isn't their native tongue, so they're not getting the support they need at home, but super bright kids. And they just need some extra help with reading and writing after school. And, I volunteer there myself, and now the company does as well. And just seeing these kids who just need a little bit of confidence to improve their reading skills, who hopefully then will go to college and go to work in some company, hopefully ours someday. But I think those are the things where you can fix problems early on. Again, going back to long term, it mightn't be the quick fix. It might be 2 generations, but it is in the long term the right thing to do.
Because some entrepreneurs and technologists and stuff, when they talk about their journey into philanthropy, it hasn't been that straightforward. It's been tough when you come from the sector that you're in to then looking at how do you solve for these things. I know you've worked with Founders Pledge, and but what else have you learned along the way, or do you think you still have a longer journey to go there?
I absolutely do, and that's why I like Founders Pledge, etc. They're experts. They do this for a living. I do compliance for a living. I do that well. So why would I think that I can judge which charities or organizations are the best to donate to? So I do think, obviously the effective altruism and the various things of working out. Sure, there are some donkeys in Cornwall that probably need some help, but again, that probably on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a 1 on the saving the world problem. So I think having organizations that, let's not say rank, but certainly judge a charity for the effectiveness is worthwhile, and you overlay that with your personal beliefs and your personal views and make some decisions about what you invest in. But I think that kind of certainly ensuring that your hard-earned money is being put to work, and you're not doing something that is throwing money into the wind.
So one of the other comments I got was that you generally want to make things better and fairer, and you wrote a letter to the Irish Transport Minister. Do you want to expand on that and what your issue was?
This is all coming together now. This is like being therapy for me. I do want to leave the world in a better place. I do get outraged. I do get annoyed by things that would be easily fixable, and I take the effort, even though it's tiring, to go and fix them. I'm the guy that moves line bikes across and puts them to the side. I'm the guy that puts shopping trolleys to the side. I even, if there's soups in the wrong order, I'll move the soups around. But I moved back from Germany and Switzerland to Dublin in mid-2000s. And I was just shocked by the level of public transport. I remember standing in Dundrum. I got off the Lewis, which was great at the time, and I needed to get a bus to Blackrock, and there was no signs from the Lewis for how to get to Blackrock. And then I finally asked somebody, and I stood at a bus stop, and there was no digital displays. And as I'm sure you're aware, Ireland is one of the most rainy countries in the world. So the fact that there wasn't a bus shelter, so I'm standing getting wet, wondering if the bus is coming along. And then a little old lady comes up and says, "Oh, this bus stop isn't in use anymore. It's the one up the road there." Yeah. So between all these things, I was like, okay, this isn't good enough. So I was unemployed at the time. So I wrote a 15-page PDF to then Eamon Ryan at the Transport Minister, who did reply to me saying, here are the things that I think could be improved in Dublin public transport. And myself and Eamon have stayed in contact since. And some of them have been addressed, some less so.
Okay, so looking forward, have you had time, because you've got tons on, but have you had much time to think about what the second half of your century on the planet might look like?
You calling me old? I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm found a sweet spot of knowing what I'm working on, knowing myself better, and finding causes that I care about. And I think with things like Founders Pledge or with Literacy Pirates, where I can now, as you said, with a little bit more money and a little bit more means and a little bit more of a network as well, can start to fix some of these problems. And certainly, maybe going back to purpose, I have realized that, leaving this planet, I don't have any kids, we won't have kids, but, leaving this planet in a slightly better state than you found it would be certainly a tick box on my tombstone, although probably not. Tick box on tombstones is not a great look, but I think, some element of feeling that the world was better for having you on it.
There's two questions we typically ask at the end. The first one is, how do you remain healthy?
I go running in the deserts of Morocco on a regular basis. I do run a lot. I hate it. I got into it in my 30s and somehow stuck with it. Again, going back to entrepreneurship and tenacity, I run 4 times a week. I tend to do that. I cycle a little bit, but eat fairly well and run. Nothing crazy.
What advice would you give to a young Andrew if you could?
Crikey. This is one thing I do think about a bit, and I think the classical entrepreneur self-analyzing, I could have done all this better, and I made so many mistakes and fail fast, and if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. Maybe slightly going into the karma and taking life as it is, that I don't feel like I've done too many stupid things, or certainly nothing that I really wish I hadn't done. So I think for me would be, trust yourself, enjoy the journey, don't beat yourself up too much, and it'll work out in the end. I think that those are the things, but yeah, everything else is fairly trivial.
Thanks for making the time to have this chat today. Congratulations on what you've built in the business. You've done it quietly, humbly, and have built a fantastic business. Thanks again for the time.
Thank you very much, Joe.
All content on High Net Purpose is provided as general information only. It does not constitute any advice, recommendation, or representations, and is not intended to influence listeners or users into making any specific investments or any other decisions. Please be aware that guests and presenters on High Net Purpose may have investments in any of the topics or products being discussed. Their reviews and opinions are their own and should not be taken as endorsements or financial advice. Before making financial decisions, we strongly recommend seeking advice from a qualified financial professional. This podcast may not be copied, reproduced, further distributed, or published in whole or part.